Chapter 21. After you gleefully continue your work for a total of 2 days, you decide to take some time for yourself, so as to see if your efforts brought with them the desired results. For while you can feel the world through your creations, you can't quite tell if the increase in living conditions did anything for your house. That's why you didn't want to continue your work despite all the fun you find in creating them, for if your work didn't actually help your family because of some misunderstanding or the like, you would have wasted time that could have been spent more efficiently if you continued, and you do quite like being as efficient as possible in such matters. Simply because giving away an advantage requires having one in the first place, and should a situation truly require you to give up on a part of your subjects' loyalty, you would like to have your hands as full as they can get, for you're sure your subjects wouldn't appreciate how you would deal with a rebellion, which in the end could breed even more problems, but this time out of nothing, and you aren't willing to give any adversary that might come forth anything but steel, which as you had learned in your previous life requires more than your own strength. And you thought that there would be many that could see themselves as followers of a genuine saint, but you can't trust the people with developing that kind of belief on their own, so you will have to know as much as possible. You're aware that your family and nobles in general aren't too well liked, at least as long as the sheep don't need a place to hide, and so you have to make sure that everyone can draw the connection. You learn that being known as a demon isn't very helpful when fighting a campaign against truly capable enemies, and you're actually a bit surprised how good that idea of yours is working. Though for all you know, the gods truly had their hands in your appearance on this world, for who else could have given you your new life? You're of course more interested in the here and now, and don't particularly care about your past, but with how smoothly your plan of becoming a saint is going, you wonder if the gods didn't intervene once more in your life. The hard road is easy, and the easy road is hard could be used to describe your life at the moment rather well, for you found yourself in a situation in which the creation of wealth is nearly effortless, and you're living a life most could only dream of. But then you have to deal with all the small stuff that's doing its best to lead you into insanity and madness one of those days. If only the gods had put some effort into creating your new mind, your life would be perfect, not that you would enjoy it, but you would prefer having to struggle in gathering resources and strength over having to struggle gathering your thoughts each day of your life. And seeing as you already dislike having to deal with minor problems that you had no hand in creating, doing so while you also have to collect your thoughts all the time just doesn't bring you much in the way of enjoyment. You find yourself wandering around Lannisport while thinking on how the gods could have left you some instructions with what they want done, but then decide to focus your mind on the matters of the physical plane of existence once more. For as long as your plans still work out, you can survive having to avoid certain topics for your mental stability, for the time being. Though the actual effect your spirits have on the season is of course limited, seeing as they only affect the magical snow that's falling nearly constantly, the little additional warmth they provide seems to make that fact fly by unnoticed. And you're pleased to see that your people are happily ignoring the remaining snow without a single complaint to hear, and were you a bit more naive you would just continue with your work, so as to further improve upon the situation. But you have decades of experience, and that everything goes as great as it does can only mean that your efforts had already achieved all they could reasonably do. Now with the results of your work confirmed, the next step is naturally to not work yourself, but instead use their happiness to encourage some proper trade. For the trade is the first thing the winter kills whenever it shows up so very much uninvited, and as such it has to be brought back as soon as possible, so you sell some gems, and then you buy a few houses, which you sell to your guild on the cheap, and then begin to buy whatever stone you can get your hands on and supplement it with your own, to fill up 70% of the guild's vast storage capacities. It's time to build and spread wealth like never before, and you think you have the right project already in mind. Seeing as the winters of your home can take years to subside, it will allow for a project that would surely be disrupted by anyone with a decent head on their shoulders, and while you could do it yourself if it came down to it, there is very little reason to not use the nearly worthless wealth instead. And isn't the construction of a new outer wall for your family's capital quite perfect to focus your mind on a new and enjoyable task, that gets gold, silver, and copper alike flowing through the city once more? In fact, with the little heat provided and so much of the snow gone, the city has more than enough wood to let the woodcutters supply your endeavor for at least a year without much of a problem, so nothing important would actually be disrupted. And while you have all the hands you could ever need, you naturally know that projecting the strength of your house outside the rock itself would be very risky at best, and so decide to write a message to your father on his little companion's back so that he can intercept any news to the king that does get out, or cancel your efforts, though you don't believe that all that frustration you can feel from your cub means that the Lord of the Rock has much love left for the king. Chapter 22. Your assumption proved correct, for your father approved of your little idea mere moments after he entered his chamber, so with how solidly the earth was frozen you've gotten his answer before the first stone could even be laid. Thus, you can't help but find yourself rather impressed with how your obstructed connection was still able to prove itself useful, in such a simple way. In fact, you hadn't even managed to gain all the surrounding land before your message was answered, which could certainly be quite useful in the future. So while thinking about this you send your mother's line a small message as well, just to make sure that you're not taken back to the rock by a dozen nights or so. You appreciate your mother and your home, you truly do, but you still love the freedom you were denied in your earlier years, and you have no desire to see the amount of freedom you currently have decline once more, especially if it can be avoided with a few simple messages once in a while. And you suppose it makes her happy, if what you feel is true. So it's hardly the end of the world to actually use your little cubs for something, right? Well, you can't really help it, even if you already know that you're too soft in matters concerning your family, for while saying you're happy if they're happy would certainly overstate things, you do still desire to please them when you can. And you suppose it wouldn't kill you to make the lions of your siblings a bit more animated, either, seeing as there isn't half a continent between you three, in contrast to your father. You enjoy your thoughts and the sight of the great trenches in front of you with a playful grin, and then wonder if you could get away with achieving a bit more, or if you would be stretching your luck. You're often seen as big by others, despite being so frustratingly small, and you wouldn't want to disappoint those that saw you in that light. Thus, you soon began thinking about the possibility of starting another project, one that wouldn't take who knows how long to finish, and would show that you could do more than throw resources at your projects. And you will have to be fast, for you can feel your father's desire to reunite with the family, and you know that he won't be coming back to the rock anytime soon. Yes, time is indeed a bit short, but if you have anything in abundance it's thoughts, and you believe you already have one that fits the situation quite decently. When you searched the markets of the town the first time, when you tried to find something interesting, you realized that the place was as bland as it got, with only the harbor providing you with some results for your search. Which means there's practically nothing of interest in the city of Lannisport that's actually worth spending good coin on, and that at the same time the population finally has the finances and time to indulge themselves a bit. If the broken down trade would now be fixed by a certain little lion, you could cultivate all the goodwill you could reasonably wish for within the allotted amount of time. And you already saw a few ways to achieve your newest goal, even without using your abilities, which is quite pleasing if nothing else, for you truly can't use your ability for everything, even if it's so very much convenient. No, you knew better than to get used to such a thing, for you didn't know who could stop you from using your new strength, and so you had understandably little in the way of knowledge when it came to its weaknesses. Though, seeing as your day has an additional 8 hours, you don't really need any additional help to be efficient, and besides, your plan concerning the current trade problem was simple, for you planned to just use the rock to replace the harbor. Simple, you know, but simple is rather good, is it not? For what could your family possibly gain by hoarding half a mountain of nearly useless stuff? Especially the fine fabrics would sell well, and with how much gold your family spent to somehow let the rock seem less empty, you're sure it would be able to provide high-quality goods for the rest of the winter. Thus, you send 2 of your knights and a few guards, as well as a message and a crate of your creations to your mother, back in the rock, and then continue to watch the work going on outside the city, for you're sure that when your mother visits the chambers you indicated all concerns she could have would vanish. In a way, you did use your ability to get that gold, but gold is gold, and stone is stone, thus there shouldn't be any problems, seeing as it isn't actually connected to you and as such is fine to use, and you would of course deny that you use that logic as an excuse to get another accomplishment without having to work for it. You wonder what others would think if they knew of your current mental state, but then dismiss it just a moment later, for there's just no use in thinking about stuff like that. Some days after the guild started to sell the first crates you can't help but wish for a challenge, something that fills the world and makes it feel more real, not for the world or humanity itself but just to have some new goal, For how it currently stands, you could actually conquer this continent if you wanted to. Thinking about it while eating your baked fish, you finally realize that with your father being the way he is, winning the realm is practically the main goal of your house. No, he would want more than just the crown for the family. Now if only there were some decent adversaries in the way, you could just stand behind your father's goals and call them your own, but with so little struggle in sight it quite simply feels hollow and meaningless to gain the realm. Yes, you might even say it feels a bit like Lannisport before you visited, but without any solutions lying around. And so you once more hope that the next day, or the next month, or the next year will provide you with a goal worth fighting for, and who knows, mayhaps your visit to the capital will do just that. Chapter 23. While you had yet to find a new goal worth striving towards, focusing your mind on buying more assets for your guild made the time quite bearable, and when the invitation from the capital finally came after some 2 weeks of waiting, you weren't disappointed. For your father made clear from the beginning that you and your siblings will have to behave if any of you will ever want to see the capital again, or put into more simple words, there's something of interest in King's Landing, and you can't even make a decent guess as to what that will turn out to be. So it is with great wonder that you accompany your family to the Crownlands. Just what could be of interest to your father, the great Lord of the Rock, that he suddenly actually cares about the opinions of others? Mayhaps you could use exactly that for your new main objective. It doesn't sound all that bad after all, especially with how you would get to annoy your father and improve your mental stability at the same time. It's not like you could help out in the capital anyway, with the king ruling, well, the Crownlands, and your family being somewhat opposed to the crown. But after you remember that your father had to put up with who knows what from the royal faction and the king, taking happiness from annoying your father started to feel so very petty, and that in no time at all. Though even then you needed a moment to scrap the thought of finding out your father's current plan, but you still managed to do so, for in the end, it would hardly matter with how much you helped your house already. Yes, you truly can't make a good guess as to what made your father so rigid in his messages, but you can still make out what didn't interest him, which sadly included your efforts in Lannisport. Hence, your own interest diminished after a few days of traveling through the snow. You find yourself once more regretting the extraction of the rock's gold, for it blinded your father to the little things, or in other words, all the new opportunities distracted him from you. Expanding the greatest city of the Westerlands and then restoring the trade, several years before the rest of the realm could do so, and you don't even get a single sentence of praise out of your father. It seems like you will have to elevate your mother to Parent of the Year, despite how you felt like a captive in the rock, with how she was the only one that gave you some actual praise for your idea. Well, perhaps your knights were impressed with you, but then, you couldn't claim that you would care if that was indeed the case, seeing as they aren't able to truly become close to you with the norms of the current age. Descendants of the great houses can't bond all that much with simple knights, even if they wouldn't mind it at all, for their duty is commonly to fight and die, be it for the small folk, the great houses, or even in the name of the faith itself, while nobles weren't thought their skills to be killed off in melee, while they helped their knights. And while you focus on these thoughts, you realize that you already had a great objective right in front of you, but while setting up a standing army was always included in your plans to heal the world, you had no way to achieve its creation until now. For one does not simply create an entire army without a lot of groundwork, and nobles like those you passed while leaving the Westerlands wouldn't be too happy about centralizing more forces around the rock, which made you dread the amount of effort required to push it through to the end. But now you had finally realized that there are even smaller steps that you could pursue, like the creation of a knight order, that could drain even the best of your enemies of talent, while elevating the rank of knight in the eyes of the nobility, and so forcing them to break down some of their restrictions of conduct. So that once the creation of a standing army is brought up, nobles and knights alike wouldn't complain too much about serving united, a small step for sure, but a step you can focus your mind on nevertheless. And from here, you can now see the following step as well, though you soon decide against allowing your thoughts to wander, for one good goal was all you required, and long-term planning on such a small scale would be of little worth. Same as your first sight of the capital, or perhaps that would be a bit unfair for the creation of fragile plans, seeing as they at least have the potential to impress someone. While King's Landing is just the saddest sight you ever saw in both of your lives, for the God's sake, some small half-burned down village makes for a 3 times better place to visit. You truly hope this isn't why your father is away all the time, for this would be the most pungent fruit of labor you could ever have dreamed of. No, you couldn't have dreamed of this corpse of a city even if you were still able to sleep, you're sure of it. The walls are weak, the houses are ramshackle, then on top of that, the people are sick and starving, while they move in the shadows of the greatest sept you ever saw, and a castle that has no right to stand with how much was picked away from it. A truly dismaying sight. You know much of this has come with the winter, but with how the stone feels it's questionable if it could even be lifted out from this undead-like state. Especially after you glance at the people of the city, going about their lives in misery, as if they never knew something else. You always thought the realm was in a halfway decent state, but this pit of a city could be burned down to the very ground without anyone else in the realm missing it, it seems. Chapter 24. Cersei and Jaime see of course nothing of it, and you couldn't help yourself but wish for a short moment that you hadn't seen anything either, but that moment passes you by soon enough. You're a bit undecided on what to think about your visit, and then you also remember that your father made clear that you three were to behave properly. Yes, he most likely knew your inner thoughts on the capital before you even had any, though why a city that has access to the taxes of the Seven Kingdoms is in such a dismaying state in the first place, isn't something you can really comprehend. Mayhaps this is the true answer to why your father was always stuck in the capital. Fixing King's Landing with normal tools would certainly make for a good amount of hard work, and when 500,000 people live in one place, actually keeping anything in prime condition would certainly be somewhat hard to achieve. It seems there are quite a few disadvantages for serving as the second man just behind the king, and with how the madman has it out for your father, you can even see him keeping the capital in this state, just to point at your father and ask if this is the best the hand of the king could do. But then how does the realm still stand if the king is truly mad enough to let this happen to his own city, and that with half the nation watching no less? It actually feels like a plot of your father now that you think about how everything fits together. You allow the king to bury you in work and ridicule you, all the while using that exact opportunity to show the full extent of decline throughout the realm, all in a place that everyone of importance can see. Yes, that does sound like something your father would do, doesn't it? For now you choose to set the matter aside and focus on being the perfect little girl as your father had requested, but while you do so you realize that your mother seems somewhat concerned while looking around the Red Keep's courtyard. Which you suppose is rooted in the fact that you have yet to see someone that isn't avoiding your party. It would seem like the nobles in the capital aren't all that fond of being seen with members of House Lannister. Not exactly a good sign for the hours to come, for you realize that someone will have to look after your siblings while your parents take some time for themselves, and with how the knights were sent to rest from the journey, you could see that your mother wants you to be the one looking after them. You would never say no, but you still wish you could just use your lions to distract them a bit, but neither your new nor your old world had moving stuffed animals, so your statues won't save you from playing this time. Damn this cheese of a castle. And really, why does anyone need 4 ways to spy on a random chamber in their own castle? It even feels like there are still some skeletons in the walls, in at least 3 of the collapsed sections under the inner keep, just sealed away. Just where's the common sense in this world? For the god's sake, this castle is disgusting from every way you decide to look at it, so much so that even comparing it to Castle Rock would be outright laughable, if you weren't stuck in this abomination. Why does your father want the crown if there's no strength or wealth to be had in the Crownlands? Is he really trying to take the realm without fighting a proper war over it? If so, that's just great, and you will be bored for years to come. So yeah, that's not happening, not if you can help the coming war along with so very little effort. And seeing as the columns that are holding up the realm are already weakened by your father's work and the king himself, how could you possibly resist? Thus, after just a week of waiting for an opportunity, you begin your little ploy to shatter the king's trust, and with it take the first step towards remaking the realm into a nation worth fighting for. You after all know that most humans need something worth fighting for to freely take up their arms and stride into battle, and a certain 8-year-old boy made for the perfect tool, for if they fought for him once they would do so again for sure. And so while thinking about the future, you command the statue you made for the occasion to push the little prince down the steps, and then smile your meanest smile as the statue clad in brown robes kills 4 guards and 3 plate-clad knights effortlessly. With it having completed its duty, you order your statue to cease existing and drop the stolen pouch of a certain unlucky noble near one of the corpses before you fill out the small and annoying, but still mildly helpful corridor. If it's there, you will of course use it, but no castle should have these many secret passages, and you believe the king will soon be of the same opinion. With 7 men dead and his son wounded, there will be little that could stem the king's paranoia, and you truly feel for the Darkland family as the pouch you used became open knowledge, but needs must. And with the royal army marching for the young prince to bring House Darkland to justice and the king getting more and more deranged by the day, one can't help but dread the future of the realm. But who knows, mayhaps a certain prince becomes the hero in shining armor the nation will need, one for which the people would go through anything, one that would make it impossible to replace the crown without a war of a fitting proportion. What a bummer. Chapter 25. If one were to say the king handled the situation poorly, you're sure they would do so well outside the Crownlands, and as such the Red Keep and the capital had little trouble returning to its usual state of misery. Of course, with more guards and knights around the castle, as anyone would expect. But all in all, little on the outside has changed. Though your eyes aren't the only way for you to observe the castle, and you notice only 3 days later that the hidden corridors of the Red Keep are once more filled with life and blood. For people that go through the trouble of staying in the capital simply need a place to talk openly from time to time, and that naturally without anyone listening in, while the king himself sees shadows everywhere. Thus encounters between parties formed of nobles meeting in the dark, and the king's spies end in the spilling of blood or the exchange of gold on an hourly basis. Which happen again and again until you decided after 2 weeks of bloodshed that you should stop the madness before the king loses his mind before his son has even healed, let alone become a proper figurehead. Father, do you already know when we're going to return to the rock? There's nothing to do here, and nobody in the castle seems to like us. That doesn't sound like you at all, Azami. You should already know that leaving the capital now won't do us any good. Can't you stop it, Father? There's nothing here that we can't create for our house ourselves, and that without all the trouble. I did so little in the last years, and it's still enough to double our strength. Father, we can take the realm for the house, even if we do it alone, and have to give up some territories. You could rule from the rock as the kings of old. Yes, it's now or never. For you will have to get his mind in the right place again, or he will just be stuck in a city full of backstabbers with a king that won't let him go, trying to grab the crown. And you finally get some reaction out of him that you can treasure, one of his good and honest smiles that promises you plenty of bloody battles in the not-too-distant future. Which relieves you to no end, as it seems that your father is truly back to his normal mindset, one that apparently can appreciate your efforts quite a bit, if your messy hair is anything to go by. You still aren't privy to his plans, and thus you can't exactly tell just how much they changed through your words, but you're sure that something has changed for the better, and you truly can't wait to leave the capital. Though no one seems more happy about the shortening of your visit than your mother, surprising as that was, you could understand her reasoning, for what mother would want her children near a place where corpses are retrieved from the walls in the dozens day after day? The king wasn't happy with your father's return to the rock in any case, but that didn't matter to neither your father nor your mother it seems, and with his mind made up to stand opposed to the crown, the Lord of the Rock became fearsome in the eyes of the scum once more. And it became apparent that it mattered now so very little if one is or isn't part of the royal faction, for your father dealt with everyone he could recall slighting your house all the same, and that of course in the king's own castle, to the king's own supporters. But nothing happened in the 2 days your father needed to sort matters out, and settle his remaining scores. There came nothing but verbal reprimands from the king, for what could he truly do? There wasn't a lack of men willing to kill for someone that's paying the right price in the capital. And his still loyal vassals won't march through the snow just to make the rock their enemy. Well, perhaps some would do it if His Majesty hadn't just put a noble house to the sword. But he did, and that's just not something that makes one any friends in the 7 kingdoms, which would be obvious to anyone that isn't at the brink of madness. You feel quite content as you see your plan unfold so perfectly, and once the prince is of age you're sure there won't be much of a problem in taking over power with how far the king's mind has already deteriorated. Yet you can't help but happily embrace the magical snow once more when you finally leave the capital behind you, for while it's currently to your family's advantage you still find yourself disgusted and repulsed by the city and everything that's part of it, seeing as this place is nearly the opposite of the future you try to achieve for humanity. Your family had naturally a rather entertaining journey back to the Westerlands, but you made sure that only the mercenaries and hired bandits got close to your party, while the knights that came to intercept your family vanished, never to be seen again. Who would have thought that the snow would actually be this useful, But then again, it only spared you little things, like the burying of the mangled corpses so far. And you suppose you will have to wait for a bit, until it will show its true power in disrupting campaigns to you. Yet it won't be that long until your father finally uses his new resources to begin the build-up of the new troops, and you're already rather entertained by just the thought of what the crown will do about said build-up in the middle of winter. And you wonder for a moment how long it will take them to realize that they literally can't breach the Westerlands' outer castles with the currently available supplies, or at all, but mayhaps they will only see their folly when they stand before the same castles that kept out invaders for as long as history was written. It's actually not too unlikely with a literally mad king on the throne, but you're more than fine with it, for should the king indeed choose to weaken himself in front of the realm some more, that would only further your plans.